let's talk about Batman movies some more. So, Joel Schumacher is hired to direct Batman Forever with the explicit directive from the studio to lighten up the series, to reinvigorate the franchise, which, after the smashing box office successes of Batman and Batman Returns, clearly needed to be revitalized. The problem that they had with Batman Returns was not the box office success, because Batman Returns, even though it did not make as much as the first Batman, and also did not have nearly the impact in popular culture, was still a massive box office hit. In 1992 dollars, Batman Returns grossed $162 million in domestic box office in the United States, and adjusted for inflation, that would be $310 million today. That's a pretty good run. It's not like, it's not the Avengers, it's not the Dark Knight, it's not Avatar or Titanic, but it's pretty damn good. It is by no means a failure. But the problem with Batman Returns was that it upset the kids. And Schumacher was hired with the explicit directive to lighten up the franchise and make it more kid-friendly. Because, of course, as we all know, the true yardstick for measuring the quality and the success of art in popular culture is the degree to which it is acceptable to stupid little 6-year-old kids. So Schumacher comes in and presides over what is, in everything other than continuity, essentially a reboot. The Schumacher films are supposed to take place in the same universe as Burton's Batman and Batman Returns. They're supposed to pick up where those movies leave off, but in everything other than the canon that they share, Schumacher's films are a total restart. It's a completely different tone, it's a completely different visual style. Totally different actors, with the exception of Pat Hingle as Commissioner Gordon and Michael Gough as Alfred. It goes to show how much the movie business has changed in a relatively short interval, in that if this were done today, it would be considered a reboot. They would just say, fuck it, we're just going to start fresh with a completely new series, a completely clean slate. As Christopher Nolan did a few years after Schumacher left the franchise. But this was not a reboot. This was a sequel. This was a sequel to Batman Returns. And on paper, back in the day, this looked great. Before anybody saw it, Val Kilmer, if you remember, was fresh off an Oscar nomination for Best Supporting Actor for Tombstone, where he played Doc Holliday. He was younger, he was more fit, more athletic, he was touted as a younger, more dynamic take on Batman than Michael Keaton had been. Just seemed like an inspired casting choice. And Tommy Lee Jones's Two-Face seemed like, again, just a brilliant choice. He had won an Oscar for The Fugitive for Best Supporting Actor. He had been a widely praised and admired character actor for many, many years leading up to this. And he was just getting to that point where he was finally about to really break through and become not just a respected actor, but a star. And he seemed like a great choice to play Two-Face. Jim Carrey had not quite, this was before The Truman Show, this was way before Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. He hadn't really showed much interest in being like a serious actor yet. He was still Ace Ventura, but we weren't quite entirely sick of him yet. So even he being cast as the Riddler was not treated as bad news, generally speaking. And in fact, his typical comic persona seemed to match what we all thought of as the Riddler, because the only other live-action Riddler had been Frank Gorshin in the Adam West TV series, and Jim Carrey's persona seemed to mesh with that version of the Riddler very well. So Jim Carrey seemed like, oh, of course Jim Carrey should play the Riddler. So what went wrong? Because Batman Forever is a really, really, really bad movie. And I know I said that Burton's Batman and Batman Returns were bad movies too, and they were. But not like this. This is a really, 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 really bad movie. About half of it, I would say, is Joel Schumacher's fault. Schumacher, as you might have guessed if you had seen his work prior to Batman Forever, was not a serious filmmaker. The Lost Boys was probably his most notable project before this. And The Lost Boys is quality cheese. It's fun to watch and laugh at and get a kick out of, but it is by no serious stretch a good movie. It's a really bad movie. Again, not as bad as Batman Forever, but bad. But the problem with Schumacher's Batman work isn't that he's not a serious filmmaker, because Tim Burton's not a serious filmmaker either. It's that he's not a good filmmaker. He's just not a very good director. He's really kind of shitty. Schumacher's Batman movies are, I think the only word that would really describe them visually is garish. They're just like, they're like a neon nightmare. It's all just like Joel Schumacher hitting you with a brightly painted hammer in the fucking face. Just boom! Batman! Boom! And it just gets old after the first 5 seconds or so. It just doesn't quite work. But how shitty this movie is only half Schumacher's fault. The other half of the blame lies on the shoulders, I believe, of the guy who was brought in by Schumacher to rewrite the script for what became Batman Forever when he came on as director, and that man's name is Akiva Goldsman. Akiva Goldsman is the worst screenwriter to ever win an Oscar for Best Screenplay. He won Best Screenplay for his writing of A Beautiful Mind, which is one of the worst movies to ever win Best Picture. It's not a very good movie, and it's a terrible, terrible script. I could say pretty confidently that if it's not the worst script to ever win an Oscar, it's at least in the top 3 or 4 of the worst scripts to ever win an Oscar. It's just terrible, and Goldsman is a terrible writer, and everything he does is just terrible. He not only wrote Batman Forever and Batman and Robin, he also wrote just a bunch of those John Grisham adaptations that Schumacher directed, just these really overwrought, melodramatic garbage like A Time to Kill and The Client. And he also wrote Lost in Space, which is another, just the best you can say about it is maybe in moments it becomes so bad that it's good. It becomes quality cheese. But that is not something that most screenwriters aspire to. Primarily what Goldsman does with his screenplay is to carry out Schumacher's directive to make the film more child-friendly. And how Goldsman's script accomplishes that is to make Batman Forever as dumb as it can possibly be. It's such a dumb movie. And Tim Burton's Batman movies were not distinguished by their intelligence and sophistication, but compared to Joel Schumacher's, Tim Burton's Batman movies are like the fucking Godfather. That's how shitty, fucking terrible Joel Schumacher's Batman movies are. The cast, which I mentioned at the beginning of the video, that seemed so promising before we all saw the movie, is just utterly wasted. Val Kilmer can be a really good actor, but he has absolutely nothing to work with. Bruce Wayne is as flat and wooden and bland and uninteresting as a character can possibly be. To call him a blank slate would be to give him too much credit, because a slate at least has some dimension, and Bruce is just like barely even there. There's just nothing. Why would I care about anything that happens to this guy? He's barely even there. Nicole Kidman has absolutely nothing to do as Dr. Meridian, except in the one scene where she takes half of her clothes off to try and seduce Batman on the rooftop, and they have this really, really bad, supposedly sexy, funny dialogue, but it winds up just being embarrassing and stupid. And then Batman gets cock-blocked at the end by Commissioner Gordon, who sees the bat signal that Dr. Meridian has stupidly illuminated to attract Batman's attention. And Commissioner Gordon comes running up on the roof in his pajamas, pulling on his coat, because I guess the motherfucker sleeps at his office in police headquarters. And he's like, "Oh, here, what happened? I'm a doddering old man who, for some reason, is the commissioner of police in a major metropolitan American city." And then Batman jumps away and, I guess, I don't know, jacks off in the Batmobile. Jim Carrey as the Riddler, as I mentioned earlier, is basically just doing a Frank Gorshin imitation. And that's not, in and of itself, such a terrible thing, because, again, Gorshin was the only live-action Riddler up to that point. So if Carrey was going to model his performance on anyone, it was going to have to be on Frank Gorshin. I mean, I guess Jim Carrey could have done something of his own, something different, but why would you want to do that? But Carrey's Riddler is like if you took Frank Gorshin's Riddler and you had him snort line after line of cocaine for like 2 straight hours. And then you immediately picked him up and put him in front of the camera and had him act out all of his scenes of the movie before he died of an explosive heart attack. That's how Jim Carrey comes across in Batman Forever. Mike Nelson the head writer for Mystery Science Theater 3000 for most of its run, and the on-air host for about the last half of its run, wrote a really, really, really great book called Mike Nelson's Movie Mega Cheese, where he reviews, shitty movies. And he has a chapter about the Batman movies, and he describes Jim Carrey's performance in Batman Forever as the Riddler by saying that there may have been one or two moments during the film when he didn't want to drive a fire axe through Jim Carrey's chest. That's Jim Carrey as the Riddler in Batman Forever. But most disappointing is Tommy Lee Jones as Two-Face. And it's not that Jones is bad, because considering what he is given to do as Two-Face, he does it about as well as anybody could have. It's just that what he is given to do as Two-Face is pretty terrible. Dick Grayson, played by Chris O'Donnell, is in Batman Forever. He appears to be in his early 20s at the time of his parents' death, which makes it odd that he would even need a guardian. Like, why does he even come to live with Bruce in the first place? It doesn't seem like the whole setup of Robin, of him being taken in by Batman and becoming his ward and being raised by Batman to become a crime fighter, doesn't really make a whole lot of sense when the guy being taken in and cared for is already an adult. And it all builds up to this big finale at the Riddler's secret headquarters, where Batman saves the day by throwing a batarang and making all kinds of shit explode for no reason. And it's just a bad, bad movie. But its domestic box office gross topped out at $22 million more than Batman Returns. So I suppose that justified the change in direction to the Warner Brothers executives, making the franchise more kid-friendly, more lighthearted, paid off quite a bit at the box office. Batman Forever made more money than Batman Returns, and it earned Joel Schumacher and company, including Akiva Goldsman, another shot at the Batman franchise 2 years later. And we all know how that turned out.